It all began here. A journey that shaped Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. A movement to stand for what is right. Over a century later, on his birth anniversary, India's only international channel is here in South Africa.
Today it has engulfed the entire country. Business owners are complaining of financial...
Going behind the headlines to bring you reports from the heart of the nation.
Former President Jacob Zuma.
WION, coming soon to South Africa on DSTV.
Vielleicht nur als Imposant.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Review in that context. There is no limit to how we might
The world is running out of energy. Power cuts and blackouts are an international phenomenon. Factories are shutting, economies are suffering. This is a painful transition. We are trying to move away from fossil fuels, but we don't have enough green alternatives. So what do? Do we turn to nuclear energy? Is nuclear energy the solution to climate change? Well, Europe certainly thinks so. 10 European countries want nuclear energy to be declared green energy. They're dealing with a major crisis, you must know this. Winter is coming and Europe does not have power. They depend on Russia for natural gas, but Russia refuses to help them. Putin is holding supplies hostage. So Europeans, with their back against the wall, are talking about the nuclear option. On Gravitas tonight, as we discuss the power crisis and the power play, we'll tell you why the nuclear pivot cannot be a political decision. Also on the show, China has launched another closed probe on the pandemic. This time it will test thousands of blood samples from Wuhan. North Korea's Kim says he's building what he calls an invincible military. You don't want to miss the images from his self-defense exhibition. In Pakistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan has reportedly taken on the army chief over the appointment of the new ISI chief. As expected, it's not going well. And is this another sign of life in outer space? Scientists report receiving extraordinary signals from the heart of the Milky Way. We'll tell you all about it. We begin, as always, with Gravitas Global Headlines.
India strongly rejects China's objection to a visit by Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu to Arunachal Pradesh, asserting that the state is an integral and inalienable part of India. This comes amid deadlock in talks over disengagement at the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh. The Serbian government terms Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti a psychopath, asks NATO-led forces to intervene after clashes between Kosovo police and ethnic Serbs leaves several people injured. The Group of 20 agrees to work together to avoid a humanitarian disaster in Afghanistan, which is witnessing soaring food prices and unemployment. The G20 leaders agree that they will need to maintain dialogue with the Taliban. Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives approve a $480 billion hike in the government's borrowing limit, avoiding a historic default which would have devastated the U.S. economy. The hike will cover the U.S. till early December. Alibaba founder Jack Ma reportedly met with business associates in recent days in Hong Kong after being largely absent from the public eye since China's regulatory crackdown on his business empire last year. Kenya rejects in totality the International Court of Justice's ruling in favor of Somalia in a long dispute over a maritime border. Kenya is concerned that the decision regarding a potentially oil and gas-rich chunk may have implications for the region. Russian President Vladimir Putin stresses on the need to speed up vaccinations as the country recorded its highest daily death toll since the start of the pandemic. Russia recorded more than 970 COVID-linked deaths in the past 24 hours. Tropical storm Kompasu forces the Hong Kong Stock Exchange to cancel all trading sessions and shut down the stock market. Schools and government services were also shut down amid fears of flooding in low-lying areas. India have added bowling all-rounder Shardul Thakur to their 15-man squad for this month's T20 World Cup, while spinner Aksar Patel has dropped to the standbys. Thakur's inclusion is seen as a cover for Hardik Pandya, who did not bowl a single ball in the UAE leg of the IPL. Thakur has taken 18 wickets in 16 games for IPL finalists Chennai Super Kings this season at an economy of 8.75 per over. Denmark have become the second team after Germany to qualify for the 2022 FIFA World Cup. Joachim Mähle's lone goal saw the Euro 2020 semi-finalists Austria 1-0 for their 8th win from 8 games in Group F. Denmark have an unassailable 7-point lead and are the only team to have not conceded a single goal in this qualifying campaign.
Have you heard about the nuclear apocalypse? It's a Cold War legend. Superpowers would drop nukes around the world. Everything and everyone would perish, basically the end of times. There were two villains in this legend: the superpowers and nuclear power. Nuclear power is the most villainized energy source in the world, and rightly so. Nuclear power made weapons of mass destruction, what we saw in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nuclear power also led to massive disasters like Fukushima and Chernobyl. So for decades, nuclear meant only one thing: flashing red lights and danger signs. But today there's a rethink. Could nuclear energy solve climate change? Is nuclear energy the perfect fuel? European countries certainly think so. They're reeling under a major energy crisis. Natural gas prices have shot through the roof in Europe, almost 600% up. Europe's solar and wind farms have been hit by erratic weather, and their biggest supply is playing hardball. That's Russia, by the way. And here's something you must know: 90% of Europe's natural gas comes from outside, 43% from Russia. Now they're suffering a severe shortage. But President Vladimir Putin of Russia is in no mood to help. He has refused to ship more natural gas to the EU. He has refused to replenish their storage sites. Why? Because politics. And there's nothing new here. He who controls energy is king in geopolitics. We saw it with West Asian oil, and we're seeing it with Russian natural gas. President Putin is using the energy crisis as leverage over Europe. Leverage for what? What does Putin want? He wants rapid approval for a key gas pipeline. It is called Nord Stream 2. Now, this pipeline will run from Russia to Germany through the Baltic Sea bed. The work is done. Only the final approval is awaited. And this is Putin's way of giving Europe a nudge, holding them hostage more like. Europe can blame Putin all they want, but the fact is they messed up too. Europe's green transition is far from perfect. So President Putin says, your policy, your problem.
The rise in gas prices in Europe was a consequence of the power shortage and not vice versa. And there is no need to shift the blame onto others, as some of our partners are trying to do. Over the past decade, step by step, systemic flaws have been laid in the European energy sector. It was this which led to a large-scale market crisis in Europe.
So what's the lesson from this energy crisis? Our traditional sources remain a political minefield like oil and natural gas, and our green alternatives remain volatile like solar and wind energy. So what do? Well, Europe is going the nuclear way. 10 EU countries have written a letter to the European Commission. These are the countries: France, Bulgaria, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Finland, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia and Romania. 10 countries, what do they want? They want nuclear power to be recognized as green power. It's controversial stuff. The EU announced a list of green sources in April last year. It had solar power, it had wind power, geothermal power, but no nuclear power. So why is there a rethink now? Because France wants it. France is pushing for it. 70% of electricity in France comes from nuclear power. President Macron wants to export this model. He wants Europe to embrace the nuclear option.
We absolutely must prepare for technologies that break away from traditional ones and for deep transformation in nuclear. The promise of what we call small modular reactors that are more adaptable and safer, since safety is a key point in the nuclear debate. Technologies to better handle our waste, on some of which progress is being made and some we haven't even thought of yet. And here lie efforts on research that for some are already very advanced.
Does Europe agree with Macron? Well, not really. There is a strong anti-nuclear movement in Europe. Germany, for instance, plans to shut all reactors by 2022. Austria, Luxembourg, Spain, Denmark, they all share Germany's position. So the EU is divided on nuclear energy, I would say much like the rest of the world. Divided. Can you really count on nuclear power as a green alternative? Let's try and look at both sides. Nuclear power is created through a process called fission, basically splitting uranium atoms. This creates a lot of energy, and I mean an insane amount of energy. So advantage number one, there is no carbon emission. There is no burning, there is no smoke. Advantage number two, a smaller footprint, smaller land footprint. A 1,000 megawatt nuclear power plant requires 1 square mile to operate. Compare that to wind power. 360 times more land. Solar power, 75 times more land. So does this mean it's time to go nuclear? Well, not yet. You see, pollution is not just about carbon emissions. Nuclear waste is equally, if not more, problematic. It remains hazardous for tens of thousands of years. And what if it spills? We're looking at a massive nuclear disaster then. The next problem is cost. Nuclear reactors are not cheap. It's easy for France to build them. But what about small island nations like the Maldives or Kiribati? How can they afford these nuclear projects? And I'll show you the price difference. 1 kilowatt of solar energy costs $1,000. 1 kilowatt of nuclear energy costs $6,500 to $12,250. Anywhere between that. So we must guard against this greenwashing of nuclear energy, this nuclear baptism. It's an easy way out for developed countries. They have the money, they have the know-how, and they have the experience. But remember, climate change affects the entire planet, not just France and company. Some experts suggest using nuclear fuel as a bridge, like a temporary source during the green transition. But let me tell you this, there is nothing temporary about nuclear energy. The plants take years to build, and their waste lies around for 250,000 years. That's a tall price for a temporary fix. I know that nuclear power seems exciting, no emissions, almost unlimited power, but are we going out of the frying pan into the fire? Well, only scientists, frankly, can answer this question. We ignored their advice once, and look where we are. So let scientists decide on the nuclear pivot, not politicians. Until then, focus on the sources we know to be safe, like the sun and the wind. Now to another headline we've been tracking for a while. Is China going to attack Taiwan? I know it's a question that we ask all the time. It's a question we've been asking too frequently of late, and that's because the threat is growing with every passing day. Just look at what the Chinese soldiers have been up to. First, they sent 150 planes to invade Taiwanese airspace, and now they're practicing how to fight on an island. The PLA released a video this week. It shows a military drill and looks like it's part of some Hollywood blockbuster. You have to look at this. Ignore the bad music in the background. I want you to pay attention to what the Chinese soldiers were doing here. They practiced storming a beach. They were throwing smoke grenades, breaking through barbed wire, digging trenches in the sand. Where do you think they'll need all of these skills? In Taiwan. Focus on the location. This is the southern part of China's Fujian province. It is right opposite Taiwan. This region is extremely important for Chinese soldiers. That's because whenever China decides to strike Taiwan, Fujian would serve as a launching site. The PLA is getting battle ready here. Even as their president Xi Jinping talks about peace, he keeps harping on a peaceful reunification of Taiwan, but there's nothing peaceful about the actions of his army. They have put together an entire playbook to conquer Taiwan. The invasion could play out through 4 military campaigns. We have a copy of what the Chinese are planning to do. Campaign number 1 involves using the Chinese Air Force. The PLA could launch missiles and airstrikes to disarm the Taiwanese. The first targets would be Taiwan's military and government. Then the PLA could go after the civilians. And with this campaign, the Chinese hope to force Taipei to submit to Chinese demands. Sounds easy, may not be in practice. Campaign number 2 will be a blockade operation. This is how it works. China tries to cut off Taiwan from the rest of the world. The PLA launches a range of attacks, from naval raids to cyber attacks. The idea is to block key supplies from reaching Taiwan and disconnect communication. Campaign number 3, target American troops. Under this plan, the PLA conducts airstrikes on US forces deployed near Taiwan. Why would Chinese forces attack the Americans? Because that would ultimately weaken the Taiwanese defense. It would be harder for American troops to help out Taiwan, and if that happens, China will have a free run on Taiwan. And this would lead to campaign number 4, an amphibious assault on Taiwan, just like the video that we just saw. The Chinese forces landing on Taiwanese terrain. They might go after the offshore islands first. Then the PLA launches a phased operation to take Taiwan. They could even choose to carpet bomb Taiwan's army, navy, and the air force. These are all scenarios that the Chinese are looking at. But the big picture is clear. They're looking at invading. They're looking at attacking. The option of a military offensive is very much on the table. That is the message that is clear. China's military planners would have hesitated to even pitch the idea of a war in the past, but not anymore. China is now openly threatening Taiwan. Beijing says its military moves are quote-unquote necessary and just.
The People's Liberation Army exercises are necessary actions to defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. The actions targeted at Taiwan independence, separatist activities, and interference by external forces. The purpose is to fundamentally safeguard the overall interests of the Chinese nation and the vital interests of people on both sides of the strait.
China's loyal friends have backed Beijing's stand. Russia, in no uncertain terms, has declared that Taiwan belongs to China. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov issued a statement. I have it with me. This is what it says. Russia, like the overwhelming majority of other countries, considers Taiwan to be part of the People's Republic of China. We have proceeded and will proceed from this premise on our foreign policy. What about America? The Biden administration believes that China is not just intimidating Taiwan, it is pressurizing allies to withdraw support to the island. Washington has warned Beijing against any future misadventures.
The PRC has stepped up efforts to intimidate and pressure Taiwan and other allies and partners, including increasing their military activities conducted in the vicinity of Taiwan, the East China Sea and the South China Sea, which we believe are destabilizing and only increase the risk of miscalculation. Our support for and defense relationship with Taiwan remains aligned against the current threat posed by the People's Republic of China, and we urge Beijing to honor its commitment to the peaceful resolution of cross-strait differences as delineated in the three communiques.
Will China heed to this warning? Highly unlikely. The PLA refuses to back down. The Biden administration is running out of moves. It is desperately trying to avoid a military face-off with China. But if tensions continue to escalate, America could find itself pulled into a new theater of conflict. And it's been a while since we discussed the Wuhan virus, more specifically the hunt for the origins of the Wuhan virus. Now, a new round of investigation is about to begin. And once again, China is the one dictating the terms to the World Health Organization. China is in the dock over the virus origin story. And yet China continues to dictate terms. Several original investigators have been retained in this new probe, even after they delivered a compromised report in the last investigation. And Beijing is also denying access to the evidence that could expose its cover-up. Nothing new there, but this is what China is up to.
A new chapter is about to begin in the hunt for the Wuhan virus origins. But this mission too is a charade. Once again, the World Health Organization is failing its members. It has created a new scientific advisory group to probe the origins. It's a new team with old faces. Several investigators who traveled to Wuhan still remain on the job, like Marian Koopmans, Thea Fischer and Hung Nguyen.